Hello, David. It's good
Ooh,
to see you.
wow.
Hey, James. Great to see you.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. We're live here with David and James.
Hello.
So thanks for coming on, James. It must have been a really busy last couple months for you.
Yes, it has been a busy couple of months right now going on. I would say up until we delivered the PDF, a lot of members of the team were actually working like 12 to 16-hour days and on weekends and stuff like that. So there was a lot. There's a lot going on to try to get. Turns out making 800 pages of a new game is a lot, and I was like, oh, I see why other companies do this one book at a time now and not both books at once. So that was interesting and good for us to learn, I think.
So you mentioned real briefly you're working on Arata, and so you guys going to do anything like official with the book? Or are you trying to Arata for the print version, or will it come after the print version?
So the books are already being printed now, but there are we have a link where we have asked people like, hey, if you find something. So it's for printings that are coming after, and a lot of it is both. It always hurts my soul, right, when we find Arata, because it's like, wow, we went over this, but even for the amount of time we were working, right, when you send 800 pages out to 30,000 people. Within a day, more hours have been spent looking at the book than you have all year, right?
Yeah.
In terms of man hours. So inevitably there's stuff. Luckily, the stuff that we're seeing is not stuff that is game breaking, and it's not that kind of thing. It's things, and if you look at the new 2024 rules, they have Arata. If you look at the Daggerheart rules, they have Arata, right?
Yeah, anyone will,
and
for sure.
Yeah, it's part of the nature of the beast. So it's just getting that stuff together, and then what we have is we have this submission form, and that's really what I was going through, where people can submit errors. And so, like, for instance, in our description of how a wall area works, there's repeated text, right? I think that's probably the most egregious that we've found so far. It's like a whole sentence gets repeated, and it's like, oh, that's embarrassing. But it doesn't mean that you're not going to understand how walls work, right?
Yeah.
So that is, from a gameplay perspective, that's good. And it also means that we will be able to take that out. We're gonna, and anybody, right, people who buy products, whenever we update stuff for Arata, will get the PDF, right, resent to them so that they have that kind of thing. We won't reprint and send you a new book, just because that's cost prohibitively expensive, but you should still be able to use your book at the table. We certainly, what we would strive to do with products is try to get it out before we go to print. This one was just really down to the wire, so that when that happens, we can make those things. But going through, right, a lot of people, like, that wall thing was probably reported about 50 times. And I was like, okay, well, I only need to make one note about this, but I need to read these 50 to make sure that, like, somebody else didn't catch something else that's in the wall section, right, or that kind of thing. So there's a lot of notes to go through, but actually not a ton of Arata to send out, which is good.
That's good. Hey, Math Guy Dave. Hey, Daniel. Math Guy Dave says starting up the Delian Tomb for the Pathfinder 2 group. Interesting. Are they playing Draw Steel or playing Pathfinder? Math Guy Dave, let us know. And players are delighted with the V1. That's good. We're playing on Saturday.
Oh,
and
cool.
We're doing the road to Broadhurst.
Awesome.
I got Teos and Sean will be playing in that one. So the Mastering Dungeons will make sure I don't mess it up.
Oh man, the pressure is on now. Mastering Dungeons and D20 player. Like, oh boy, it's that's a lot of fun, and that's an adventure written by Carlos Cisco, who's a longtime freelancer, has done a lot of really good work for us, and came in to write, like, it leads into write our starter set, the Delian Tomb, and everything like that. And it's an adventure we put out there to, if people want to run at a con or their library, or just want to run Draw Steel at their house one night, right? Like, you can download it for free and do whatever you want with it, basically.
It looks really good. Really good format. I think easily for us will be well under 4 hours, but it's nice and set up where you can chunk it out into 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour, whatever you have time for. So yeah, really good formatting.
Thanks. Yeah, that was our goal, right? Knowing that conventions have slots between 1 and 4 hours, right? And longer too, if you want to. I've seen David playing 8-hour games before. At cons.
Were there Tarasques involved or Tarasques involved?
Yes, we played together. Yeah. There were Tarasques involved. It was great.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful adventure when I got a chance to play Invasion of the Planet of Tarasques. Did I mangle that title?
No, that's word for word perfect.
James's table with Sly Flourish and his tidy whities and all sorts of bananas stuff going on.
To be clear, it was Mike Shea in his tidy whities, not his character. Mike Shea sitting down. No, it was his character was running around in his underwear because he realized that he didn't take magic armor, and he realized that it didn't matter. Like the only way he was going to get hit was if he would be missed would be if a natural 1 was rolled against him, whether he was wearing armor or not. And so he took his armor off and then was just running around naked with a greatsword. That
was a fun adventure. David ran that for us later. Awesome. And we had a good time with that one.
That's great. Thank you.
So what's coming up next for you guys? You got a lot of stuff on the drawing board still, right? A lot of stuff.
Yes. In fact, I just had a couple meetings today about it. So coming up next for us are we have some classes that are in development right now. So the Summoner class, which is a class where you summon a lot of minions, right? And we want you to be able to control up to 12 creatures on the battlefield, and we also don't want your turn to take any longer than anybody else's turn. And so Willie Abiel, our senior designer, has put a lot of work into the Summoner and has really been trying to work hard to make that happen. And basically, you still only make 1 roll on your turn. You roll for everybody attacking at once, kind of. And there's other things we've done to speed it up, but that's probably the biggest and most significant thing. And then we also have the Beastheart class. Guy named Paul Hughes has been working on that for us. The Beastheart class is we have a 5e class that is the Beastheart. That is the pet companion class. So you don't have 12 things. It's just you and a big creature, right? Working together it could be a big bear or wolf, but it could also be like a basilisk, right? Or something like that that you get to pal around with. And then we have a book of ancestries that we're working on as well. And those new ancestries, there's 6 new ancestries that are going to be available for players. Goblin is one. Raiden White, which is rat folk. Fairies and shadow elves are gnomes are part of that, and in MCDM world, gnomes are tiny. So they're they're small. They ride squirrels
tiny
and
too?
stuff. Fairies are tiny too. Yeah. So we had to come up with tiny rules. And then the last one is we don't have a name. Or I should say we do have an internal name, but I don't think we've announced it yet for this ancestry. But it's Dragonfly Folk.
And they come from other worlds than Timescape. Is that how that works?
Yes. So the Timescape has a place called Equinox, right? And Equinox is sort of, for lack of a better equivalent, it's as if the Feywild and Dark Sun from D&D were kind of smashed together, right? So it is this world that is has a lot of verdance to it, like the Feywild, right? There's a lot of jungles and plant growth and stuff like that, but also everything there is trying to kill you. And at the same time, it's a world that is dying. It has this scarcity of space and resources to it. So the creatures who inhabit that world, many of them are trying to come into ours. So, and that's true of, I think most of the ancestries are from there, except maybe Raiden Whites. Raiden Whites are just rat folk who live in our world, and we like them and we think they're cool, so we're going to include that too. So
it seems like you've got a lot of background setting information worked out amongst yourselves, and just sort of suggested so far in the rules books with the gods and the classes and the species. Can you tell us what you've got and what are your plans for the setting going forward?
Yeah, that's great, because we haven't even, those are all the player options, right? We also have a bunch of director stuff coming. So we're releasing another first level adventure called The Fall of Black Bottom. You all played through the prototype of that a long time ago. We've expanded it, right? That what essentially what you played would be the first act of 3, right?
Yeah.
So that's part of it. And then we are planning on putting out a bunch of adventures, which is probably the first place you will learn more about the lore of these worlds. So there's, in addition to Fall of Black Bottom, there will be an adventure called The Red Road, which is about following a bunch of gnolls, trying to basically beat them to the settlement that they are about to run over and raid, right? And then getting there and defending that settlement from the gnolls. There is another adventure called The Dark Heart of the Wood, that is sort of an investigation of something is causing a plant life in a village to go haywire and try to kill people, and creating plant zombies and things like that. And so it's an investigation to go see what is the thing that is doing that. And it's a big monster that I think people will be excited about. And then the last one is The Condemned, and The Condemned takes place in Capital, which is, or I should say it starts in Capital. And The Condemned is this idea where you start captured, right? And while you are captured, it's basically like the Suicide Squad. You're wearing like a war dog control collar that can blow you up. And so the people who have captured you, whether you did the crime or you were framed for it or whatever, say like, hey, here's a chance to get out from under our thumb. We just need you to essentially sneak aboard the Death Star and free someone and bring them back, right? And instead of the Death Star, it's this giant floating city called the Chrysopolis, where Ajax the Invincible, who is a villain that we talk a lot about in our monster book, he's on there, and that's like his floating fortress of doom. You don't necessarily fight him because it's a 3rd level adventure, right? And Ajax is an 11th level villain, and the game only goes to 10th level. And so you don't necessarily fight him. You maybe there's a chance to cross paths with him, and if you are brave/foolish enough, you could try to cross swords. But yeah, so that's where we're getting into like 2nd and 3rd level adventures with those. And we have talked about, and we've talked about this publicly, eventually putting out some sort of box set that is a guide to Vasloria, right? Which is where a lot of the setting information is. So that's something that we're looking at, in addition to putting out also a longer adventure, right? So like all those adventures we talked about, those are, going to be smaller than the Delian Tomb, longer than the Road to Broadhurst, right? But then Crack the Sun will be the longest adventure we've written yet, probably take up about 5 levels of play. And that takes place throughout kind of Vasloria, and then also in Equinox, this area that we're talking about. So we're looking at that. So those are all the things that we're looking at, and trickling out some of the setting information through these adventures, and then giving people a guide eventually that is like, here is Vasloria. And we would like to eventually do that with like, here is Capital, right? And we have some timescape plans too. We're not 100% sure if that is a setting thing or if that is like an extension of the game, or maybe a whole other game that uses the Draw Steel rules and is totally compatible, where you could be a tactician and go back and forth.
That sounds cool. Sarah says hi and says thank you for making such an awesome system.
Oh, thank you so much. Very, very kind. Thank you.
Yeah, Thomas is here. Daniel's here. Let's take a look a little bit at these characters for the Road to Broadhurst, and we'll get the designer's take on this. Let's see if I can share it here. Boom.
You're gonna tiny text. Get ready for tiny text.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you put them in Roll20.
The Road to Broadhurst. Yeah, I'll be running it in roll 20.
Awesome.
You got 9 pre-gens, hitting all 9 classes, right? There's 9 classes in the released rules. And just as like a primer for people getting ready to play this game, I thought I'd kind of go over, look at the character sheet, look at what I'd advise a player to, watch out for as they're playing, and maybe you can chime in with additional information. So let me look at here. So
can I just compliment your creation of the tokens here? Because you did that, and it's so cool how some of them are, you've got little pieces of each one breaking the frame. And it just looks really nice and really clean and cool. And so my hat is off to you.
Thank you
for doing that.
Yeah, I like to run my games because I don't like to have things going outside of the square when things are all together and fighting together. So I do it the way they're all, connected. And even if I have names on a character, I'll put the name actually sideways so it fits. Let's do one here. Yeah. I'll put the name even on the side here so that when you're fighting in close quarters, you can see everything. So let's look at the Fury. And we'll talk about So I have these things, these macro buttons built in. So this is like all the kind of stuff the Fury would do. But maybe we talk about action economy real quick. So you have an action and maneuver and a move that you're going to do. And you can turn your action into a maneuver or turn your action into a move as an option. And you'll have a bunch of abilities that'll appear on your character sheet. And those abilities will be defined as to what they are. So here we're looking at the character sheet for the Dwarf Fury. And I'm just going to jump right down to the abilities here. So you'll have some free strikes that are like your basic default. I'm going to pick up some weapon and attack with it, close range or out to some default range for my character, depending on what gear I have. And for this game, you're going to roll 2d10 when you take your action. You're going to add a modifier to it that's normally your highest characteristic, not always, but normally your highest characteristic. And then you'll compare that result to a table and you'll get 3 levels of results. And those are the 2 free strikes we got on the left there, ranged and melee. And then you have some signature abilities. These are actions you can do all day long. They're a little bit better than the defaults. They might bring in some things that are like thematic to the class, like this version of the Fury is all about pushing things around. So he's got his brutal slam where he's pushing 1, 2, or 4. And when you're pushing things in this game or sliding things in this game or pulling things in this game, you can hit things against each other, which is something 4th edition D&D never really figured out, or I don't think ever described. And we played The Fall of Black Bottom, and it was all about pushing stuff around and smashing things into walls, throwing things off of the edges of things. It was a lot of fun. So we had a good time with that. And then you'll have some heroic abilities that you can do as your heroic resource builds up over combat. And they'll start out where it's at 0, and you'll get a little bit of it each round, and you'll get it for various little things that might help add to it. And then when you finish an encounter, you'll get a victory. And next time you start a next encounter, you start out with your heroic resource matching how many victories you have. So the further in the day you go, the higher that resource starts in every fight. And so it's like a really neat push-pull for the party to decide how hard and how far are we going to go, because they get better and better as they go, which is a real neat turnaround, I think, from a lot of systems. Who was the driver for that idea to turn that Nova around?
So that was that's actually the first thing we came up with for the game, and this was in I want to say June of 2022. Maybe Matt and I were talking about the game, and we knew we wanted to make an RPG, and so we were talking a lot about well, what could it be? What could we do? And we talked about how we wanted to make a heroic game, and it came up that I had said to him, I think one thing that really kills the momentum of a heroic game is either everybody holds onto their stuff and then they waste the big boss in a round because it's I'm just going to hold on to my cells, or right before they go into that big battle, it's I have plenty of stuff. I could survive, but don't we all agree that it would be better if I had my 7th level spell slot back so I could cast Hero's Feast or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And everybody's like, yeah. So like, let's hole up in Strahd's parlor before we go fight Strahd, right?
Yeah.
And so we were like, how do we make it so that instead of the battle being really interesting at the beginning, and then everybody's just casting firebolts until we're done, right? How do we make it that the battle gets more interesting than it goes on and the adventuring day? And we came up with this together. So this was the first thing we came up with for what would eventually become Draw Steel. And we stuck to it. And it's funny because one of the things that I always kind of thought about in making a game was like, well, obviously you start with your core mechanic first, right? Like how do you roll dice? It's like, oh no, you should really start with like, you start with the narrative, right? What kind of story are you trying to tell? But in terms of mechanics, it was like, oh, for this, we should really start with what is the gameplay loop, and then pick a core mechanic that's going to help us support that gameplay loop.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was really where we started.
Yeah, I think it turned out really good. So you got your abilities that you're looking at. You got the free ones you can always fall back on. The signature ones you'll be doing most of the time. Your heroic ones you're going to build up to and use as you get those heroic resources built up. Most classes have some sort of triggered action too, so you're always engaged in a round. You're always looking for when is this trigger going to hit, and in addition to triggered actions, and those are the main actions for this class here, this barbarian. Every class has their heroic resource, and so you have to be pretty careful watching the table for your heroic resource. Now, I don't think a barbarian. It grows when they get winded, and it grows when they are dying. It might not show it in this one here, but let me show it on Rule 20. So if you're playing that Fury, I have here all the triggered and free things that they can do. So they have Lines of Force that triggers when the target's force moved. They have their Ferocity, which at the start of their turn, they're going to get to roll a D3 and up their Ferocity. That's their heroic resource. The first time in a round, they take damage. They're going to add 1 Ferocity. The first time in an encounter, they get winded. They'll add a D3 Ferocity. And the first time in an encounter, they're dying. They'll add a D3 Ferocity. So you're going to be wanting to watch the table for those things to happen so you can build up your heroic resource, not miss it. And you'll be wanting to watch for that trigger, to use that triggered ability that you have. So you're going to be really engaged, I think, a lot in this game. It's going to be important to know what you're looking for with that heroic resource, because it'll vary. If we look at Tactician, they'll have Focus that they get 2 every start of their turn. The first time in a round, them or an ally damages their marked target, they'll get 1. The first time in a round, an ally within 10 of them uses a heroic resource, they'll get 1. So those are the 3 things you're watching for as a tactician while you're playing. And if you know that ahead of time and you kind of jot down some notes for yourself, you won't miss those things. And then they can also parry. So that's all their triggered actions to watch out for. Someone like the Censor. The Censor, he's a tough one for a brand new player because there's a lot of triggered things for a Censor. So they have My Life for Yours is one thing they could do, where if the target starts their turn or takes damage, they can use that. They're humans. So they have a Resist the Unnatural anytime they take type damage. They can use, as a maneuver, Judgment, where they put Judgment on one of the other characters or one of the other monsters, one of their enemies. And while they have an enemy judged, they can, anytime the enemy uses a main action, I have them all right here, actually.
Yeah, there
enemy
you go.
uses a main action, then they can deal holy damage to it. Enemy drops to 0 stamina, they can use their judged on another enemy. If they have a heroic resource, which is their, I forget, theirs is Wrath. And then adjacent enemy shifts, they can stop their shift. If an enemy in 10 uses a power roll, they can give them Bane. Enemy in 10 uses potency, they can lower the potency. And if they damage an enemy with a melee attack, they can taunt it. So, and then they got their Wrath, which on the start of their turn, they're going to get +2. And first time in a round, their judged creature damages them, they'll get Wrath. And the first time in a round, they damage their judged creature, they'll get a Wrath. So that's one of the most difficult classes, I'd say, to watch out for all the ways something can trigger once you have someone judged.
That's sort of the vengeful holy warrior class.
Yeah, as like a vengeful paladin type of thing, or paladin of vengeance.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you're
Put
watching
me down
that
for
step.
that on Saturday.
Yeah.
Yes.
You want that one?
Yeah.
All right. So let's see what David needs to know. So you got to know all these things for judging. Your maneuvers. So remember, you get an action or main action and a maneuver and movement. So your 2 maneuvers, you're a human, so you have detect supernatural. You can do that, or you can use your judgment, which is going to be your main maneuver you're going to want to use. That puts judgment on one of your enemies, which really kind of snow piles all the things you can do to that enemy, and your allies can do to that enemy. That you'll be watching for all these things. And then, as you're building up your heroic resource, you can arrest them, which is you're going to do holy damage to them and grab them. And if they try to attack someone else while you have them grabbed, you can stop that and redirect the attack. You can do the Gods Punish and Defend, where you're going to do holy damage, and you can spend a recovery for you to recover or an ally to recover. So those are the 2 things that are heroic resources, and you're looking to build up your heroic resources to be able to use those things. Now, as a sensor, you're also looking for all the different judge things you can do that take 1 heroic resource each. So that's your character that you're playing, that you're watching out for those things, and I think it's going to make the game very engaging. I think you have to be careful not to get sidetracked, because you might miss those things triggering, right? And so there would be a lot of incentive not to be sidetracked.
I'm always trying to find classes that reward me for paying close attention.
Paying close attention
to the game. Yeah. So I like that.
This one's going to give you a lot of that. And they all have that triggered feature. They all have 2 or 3 things that are building up their heroic resource and so you got like 3 or 4 things you're watching for all the time while you're playing. And I think it's pretty neat that way. I'm excited to play.
The idea, right, is to try to keep people engaged. I see Daniel Lolobo talks about, right, the initiative system and the triggered actions, right, and the building of heroic resources. Those are all about, like, keeping people into the game and excited about the game and, like, watching their friends' turns and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's the sensor, which is often referred to as the best class because it is Matt Colville's favorite class and how he refers to it. So you chose wisely, David, to pick that. You may also like the tactician, who also has a lot of paying attention to do, because they have a similar thing. Judgment is like a debuff, and Mark is like a buff for your friends.
So if you wanted to play the tactician, you mark a creature. You grant all your allies edge all the time, as long as you're in line of sight. They have edge on all their attacks against your marked target. Yeah. So that's cool. And there's a lot of things you can do.
Well, Tom, do you want to round up some questions from the chat there?
Yeah. Okay. So, why is this guy explaining the rules to James?
He's explaining the rules to you.
James, can you explain both malice and encounter value scaling with victories? Is that to keep the cinematic feel? It feels like the world scaling with the players, like in a video game.
Yes. So not just in a video game, right? But we talk about this in the beginning of the book, right? That it's related to, like, building a heroic narrative, right? And so our assumption going into the game is that you're choosing Jarl Steel to play because you want to tell a heroic story. And in a heroic story, right, often the easiest battle the heroes face is kind of at the beginning, and the hardest battle they face is at the end, right? That's sort of the narrative structure in any comic book, movie, video game, right? A novel that you read that has like a heroic sort of arc to it. And so the idea, right, is that you are encouraged to press on, and we see this all the time. And that's one reason we kept it. We were so excited about victories that, like, it worked, right? Like, people were like, "Oh, I have 5 victories. I'm low on recoveries. Maybe we should rest, but I just want to keep pushing on." And that made us feel good, right? Like, that's the moment where Sam and Frodo are like, "We just got to get this ring to Mordor. we're tired, we're exhausted, but we're going to keep going, right? We want you to push yourself like that, right? Like Captain America strapping down his half shield after Thanos has broken it and standing against Thanos' army, even though nobody's there to back him up, right? And so, but what we have found is like, okay, well, the director also needs to keep pace. We don't want those battles to just become easy. We want them to feel cool because all of a sudden you can do more cool stuff because you're starting with more of your heroic resources, but we want it to feel challenging. So the director has a resource called Malice, right? And Malice is they can spend on a lot of different things that their enemies can do. And Malice also scales with the average number of victories that the player characters have. So you start with a certain number of Malice equal to the victories. Now, the thing about Malice is that, like, if the players have 10 victories and you have 10 Malice, you are going to be able to spend a lot of Malice, but them having 10 victories does give them like a slight edge a little bit in the math. So they still feel heroic and they're still rewarded for pressing on. They're just not able to entirely dominate the encounter, right? So that's why we give that sort of advice, is we absolutely want that arc of like the enemies are scaling in power, as are you, right? And that's how it should feel. So yeah, it seems to have worked, right? We were a little worried when we instituted it. Are people going to feel like, oh my gosh, this is so cheap? That like the enemies are also getting more powerful, and they don't at all. People sometimes have that reaction on paper when they first read it, but when they actually play, the players still want to press on. So that we were very excited to learn that through testing.
So Malice, for those watching who don't know, you got these extra little features. There's basic Malice that all enemies could have, and then each group of enemies has their own kind of like set of Malice things. Bugbear Malice, for example, they have 4 different ways they can spend Malice, and just little ways that the encounter gets more difficult and more interesting and more difficult for the party to face off against. I love the demons in Draw Steel. I love how unique they are.
Thank you. Yeah, we really wanted you to be able to look at a demon and know it was a demon, and look at a devil and know it was a devil, right?
Yeah.
And so I think all of the demons are drawn by Nick Despain, who is a staff artist for us, and just does an incredible job. And demons also eat souls, so that's what those like blue faces and blue light sort of fire that's coming out of them, those are the souls inside the demon that they're consuming.
All right, next question from Daniel. Just a comment, really. Found out the way resources can trigger another player's turn, initiative swapping between sides. Oh yeah, let's talk about initiative real quick, and then we'll get back to the next question. So the way I've kind of implemented initiative, when you're playing at a table, it's easy to talk amongst each other, and it's a little bit harder on a VTT. So I just have a system where players can kind of flag when they're ready to go. So if combat starts, I'll have the players say, okay, if you are still thinking of what you're going to do, hit that 0 initiative button. If you know what you're going to do and you can go whenever, hit that 1 initiative button. If you know what you want to do and you should go right away, hit that 2 initiative button. And then I'll add the monsters to the initiative. And so we'll roll initiative, and of course initiative is a D10 roll, and players get to choose who goes first if the roll's a 6 or higher for them. And once it's the player's turn, I just look at the list here on the initiative order and I say, hey, Censor, Null, which you guys want to go first? Because I see those are the only 2 that say they want to go right away. And then they have a quick discussion, and then we move them up. And then he's done. Monster goes. Then it goes back to the players. And if the initiative still looks like this, I know immediately the Null's going next, because he's the only one that says I want to go right away. And if it's a bunch of 1s there, I'll just take them in whatever order they show up in. And so that's how I do initiative. It seems to work pretty fast. And it still honors the idea that players can do it in the order they want. And then if you're playing at a table, it's much easier to have those conversations. And you can have some sort of marker at the table to say, I want to go right away, or that. So it's a back and forth initiative system, right? And that way it can really change how each turn looks a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very cool.
Censor Best Class. Daniel says, general adventure design question. How do you keep adventures from being too railroaded, and how might Draw Steel change adventure design?
Good question. I don't know that Draw Steel is necessarily going to reinvent adventure design, right? There's already a lot of good adventure structure and a lot of great people who talk about how adventures can and the best adventures are structured. In fact, I recommend the DM David blog. You can read a lot about histories of adventures as well as good structures and things like that, as well as great adventures written by David, which are linked on that blog. And so, so I don't know that we're doing that. I think the idea of like railroading is a good question because with Draw Steel, we have this idea of like, well, maybe the encounter gets harder as you get victories. And we, the adventure designers, don't necessarily know, right, how many victories you have if we're doing like a sandbox, right? That was one of the challenges with the Delian Tomb was like, you might have a lot of victories when you come in here, right? And that sort of thing. The big thing that we do is we have a lot of scaling advice in our adventures for the number of players, which can also be flipped for, hey, we have a lot of victories. Well, then maybe you have more players, right, in your party. That's how we often tell people to scale with building the number of victories is like, okay, if you think this needs to be harder and you have 5 players, use the advice for if you have 6 players instead, right? Or if you have 3 players, use the advice for if you have 4, right? Like that kind of thing is one way that we handle that. But the other one is that like we also know that if you're going into if you have really saved up your victories, we know that like it might be a hard fight just because you only have like a little bit of stamina left, right? So even if you get in there and you try to kill everything, we know that those enemies are not going to miss you, right? When they attack. And so it's going to be painful to go into that fight anyway. So that's another thing that we've done in the design is like every encounter is going to cost you a little something probably, unless you absolutely wipe out everybody in not the first round, the first turn of combat, right? Which is it should be nearly impossible to do in Draw Steel. I'm sure somebody at 3 months from now, someone will have informed me that I'm wrong. But yeah, so that is the that's sort of the general advice is that like I think what makes a good adventure in any D20 fantasy game is a lot of what makes a good adventure in Draw Steel, right? The same design theory applies to a lot of that stuff.
I was going to say, you guys kind of thought about that, right, with the adventure encounter design, because invariably, as players get more and more skilled in a system, they can take on more and more challenges. And I think it's kind of just built in that you have some ideas for how you can up the challenge. I think any system needs a slider, because you're going to have just variety of parties, variety of skill of players, knowledge of the system. And so it's like you can never be right forever.
No, and it'll always vary, and there's always new players. Hopefully, right? There's always new players too.
And then you come back to new players who need to be right back at the bottom of the scale.
Yeah, and so it's one of those things where you're like, who are we writing for, right? And it's like, well, if you include a lot of different sliders, you can cover your bases and write for a lot more people, right? Because we often, one thing that was happening right at the beginning when we were trying to talk about how should the power roll look, what should the graphic design be, the graphic designers we were working with had pitched us like, you should put just symbols here. It would look really cool. Right. And it was like, well, yeah, but people need to know that like less than 11 is tier 1 and 12 to 16. And they were like, well, those people are going to learn so fast, especially if they play every week. And I was like, hang on. No, not everybody plays every week, though. In fact, most groups, that's the aspiration. But a lot of people are playing once a month. A lot of people are playing once a year at a con. Right. Like, so we can't cater to even 30% of people, which would be amazing, right? Playing once a week. We need to keep in mind that this is a game that people are going to play at all different ways and all different paces, right? And that sort of thing. So that's how we ended up with like the numbers actually within those symbols rather than a bunch of other graphic icons, right?
Before we go back to the next question, let's take a quick look at the talent. Who Teos will be playing the talent, I think.
Awesome.
This weekend. So the talent's interesting in that they have a heroic resource that can go negative. Tell us about the talent a little bit.
Yeah, so the talent, right, and we made a 5e version of the talent, and so it is inspired by that. Although Draw Steel being a very different game, we had to sort of come up with new mechanics. So the talent has a heroic resource called Clarity, and they uniquely can go into Clarity Debt, right? And Clarity Debt, when you are in Clarity Debt, you are strained, right? And while you are strained, there's a baseline negative effect, which is essentially when you use those abilities, you're going to take some damage, right? You take 1 damage for each negative point of clarity you have. And the maximum value you can do is like at first level 3, right? You can go into 3 negative clarity. So it keeps hurting you, and you're like, oh, maybe I should wait for my clarity to build up and get out of this debt. But then you have these strained riders on many of your abilities. So you can see here in Kinetic Pulse, right? The size of your burst increases by 2. So because you're strained, you actually cover more ground with this thing. But then also you're bleeding until the start of your next turn, which means you're taking more damage when you use it, right? So yeah, there's a lot of different you take 1d6 damage and are slowed save end. Sometimes it's just bad. Sometimes it's a mixed bag. It's good and bad, right? So sometimes it's like, well, and we did that to encourage people to go into Clarity Debt sometimes, because it's like, oh, maybe I want that burst too, right? I want to cover more ground. So let me spend a bunch of clarity and go into Clarity Debt so that I can become strained and do this thing. Right?
There's a lot of ingenuity to that, because a lot of players wouldn't want to be strained ever unless there was some sort of carrot, some sort of appeal for that. And when there is that kind of exciting little lure to spend and strained, it creates a fun dynamic for the character.
Yeah, this Kinetic Pulse signature ability, I mean, it gets much bigger. A 1 burst to a 3 burst. It does good damage. It's your signature, so you can use it all the time. So you'd want to be kind of riding that -1 clarity and be hitting that a lot. I could definitely see that'd be a fun class to play. All these classes are fun to play for a player, I think. There's so much like little nuanced stuff that you can really dig into and bring out on the table. I'm really excited to run a game finally with the final version, for sure.
How often did you go through class concepts and say, this isn't playing with as much fun at the table, or not meeting our targets?
That was a conversation that we had a ton last year, right? And I was actually just talking. So Willie is the one who came up with like, well, maybe Strange should be good sometimes, right? And that really changed the game for Strange, because it meant that people wanted to do it sometimes, and so they would, right? Because it's entirely on you whether or not you become Strange, and it totally changed the way people played the talent, right? And he was like, they need to be big. When there is a reward, it needs to be big. And you're right, going from burst 1 to burst 3, right, you cover way more of the map when you do that. Because it's everything within 3 squares of you suddenly that you're affecting. We also had that conversation a lot about the null. So, and I was talking today to Jordy, who is the designer of the null, about how he really took, so the null is a class that is an unarmed fighter who is psionically powered, and they have this null field that is an aura they project from themselves, and it makes it easier to resist the supernatural and other abilities of your enemies, right? It's sort of the baseline, and then you can spend discipline, which is your heroic resource, to make it do other things, and it'll do other things based on your subclass and stuff like that. So that is the null field, right, that the null has. It took a long time to dial in what should the null field do so that it is always useful, right? Because the null field is kind of like, it's in the name, right? Like, this is what the null does, is they dampen the abilities of enemies. And also in a way that didn't totally make it not fun to be the director, right? Because you could read sometimes like, this is amazing from the player perspective, and then you read the director's feedback, and the director was like, I hated having it because you made all these cool monsters, and then my monster couldn't do the cool thing, right? Like, I didn't get to have fun, and it was like, oh, okay.
Bless you for having that perspective. There might be other game companies that just don't think about
Making sure the person running the game has fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a huge thing because we hit the character classes hard, and then we got like really into monster design after that, and said like, what we need to find a way to make running these monsters fun and not too much of a burden. And we want that moment, that moment when you're reading a stat block and you're like, woo, right? We want that happening all the time when people are playing Draw Steel, and that's how Malice came in, right? We were like, okay, we were sort of like, should we burden the director with tracking a resource or not, and can we make it worthwhile, right? And so that was a big thing, testing with that. And that's so yeah, both our psionic classes, we did a lot of that, but we ended up doing that for every class, right? And it's one of those things where we would look at our survey data and say, okay, what is the weakest class right now? What's coming back? Well, let's try to make it the coolest class, right? And then we'd look at it again and be like, okay, we did that, but now this is the weakest, so we got to bring that up, right? Trying to constantly bring up the level so that sort of the floor of where the game is the least fun is always getting higher and higher. And yeah, so it was a huge part of what we do. We play test a ton, we survey a ton, right, to try to get the game into a place so that people are just having a good time. And we, again, director fun was like a huge thing for us. Just because we all run game, we're all forever directors, except that now I run for everybody, so they all get to play. It's kind of be it.
Let's look at the things that Noel's got to watch. So this guy's discipline. Start of his turn, he's going to get +2. He's watching for the first time in a round an enemy in his null field uses an action. I'll give him +1. He's watching for the first time in a round Malice is used by the GM, giving him +1, or director. If his discipline's sitting higher than 4, some classes have this thing where when their resource is high, they get special benefits from it. And a monk, metakinetic monk in this case, when their discipline's 2 or higher, they get more knockback, forced move. 4 or higher, they can get surges. 6 or higher, they get edges on grab and knockback. And so knockback is a maneuver that anyone can do, but a monk kind of builds on what it can do because they get to use a different resource for it, I'm pretty sure. They get once their discipline's sitting at 2 or higher, they're pushing within with a minimum roll. Oh, they can push or slide with it, not just push. Even a minimum roll, they're pushing or sliding 3 to 4 to 5, depending on what their roll was. And discipline higher than 6, they'll get edges on the rolls. So it's a pretty neat interaction for the monk. Another fun one. And so the monk's watching what the GM is doing, basically. That's the 2 things they're watching for. Another fun one is the Fury, who's building up their ferocity. It's a random number every round on the start of their turn, D3. The first time they take damage, they get more ferocity. The first time they're wounded, they get to roll another D3. The first time they're dying, they get to roll another D3. So neat stuff for them to be watching. And all classes are a little bit different, a little bit tweaked, and it's just fun that you're going to be watching that kind of thing. The Troubadour, with their, I don't have them all worked out, but with their drama and with them going crazy drama if they die, that was pretty neat.
Yeah, the Troubadour's resources drama, and so they have like a big list of stuff that the first time it happens, instead of once per round, it's like in the encounter when this happens, somebody does this, and they have they have this, if someone dies, right? If a hero dies, they get 10 drama, including themselves, and they can continue to gain drama when they're dead. And if they have 30 drama, they just spring back up, right? So the Troubadour is an immensely fun class to play. But there is a lot to look out for when you're playing them. So they do a lot of stuff. They also have what are called performances, which like they decide at the top of a round, what performance are you doing? And it could be, hey, I'm doing this performance that gives everybody a speed boost, right? So all of my friends are faster now, or this thing that lets me heal people, or this thing that lets us deal extra damage, right? All that kind of stuff. So is fun.
Yeah, there's a couple of example performances, Battle of the Beast and Revitalizing Limerick. if you're playing the tactician, you're going to be watching out for what other players do a little bit, because you want to see the first time you or an ally hits your marked guy, or the first time an ally in 10 uses a heroic resource. So some are focused on the other players, some are focused on just what you're doing, some are focused on the damage you're taking. There's a lot of variety there, which is
that's
pretty interesting. The Elementalist, I haven't done theirs yet, but they have a thing called persistent spells, which is an interesting take. So this is a conflagration spell, takes 5 of the heroic resource. It's a cube 3 and 10, so it's a big spell area. Yeah, and I like how you did it, spell areas too, how that works. But it's persistent, so at the start of their turn, they can spend that much of their resource to keep it going. And in this case, they can use maneuver to use the ability again without spending essence.
That's right. So, yeah. And so it becomes very powerful because you can be doing, you can do a lot of stuff like that where you're maintaining a bunch of different abilities, and you're like, okay, I'm blasting fire, and I use my maneuver to do that, so I still have my main action to do something else, right?
Yeah,
and I'm going to use it to do that. Yeah. Totally.
Okay, let me get back to the questions here. Sarah says, I'm curious why you chose squares instead of hexes for the map, and even more, why no Pythagorean? So all circles are squares.
So this is a very common question, Sarah. So why no hexes? One big reason is that a lot of the maps that are currently, Draw Steel is a game that requires maps, right? And a lot of the maps that you can currently get online use squares. And so we make the game a little bit harder to play if we pick hexes, because there aren't as many hex maps out there, right, for people to go get. The other reason is that a lot of rooms on maps tend to be square shaped and tend to have a grid that fits nicely into those square or rectangular rooms, right? And that hexes then create this issue of like, well, can I stand here? Can I not? Because the map wasn't built for hexes, right? So it has a lot to do with like the technology that is out there that exists that makes it easier for people. And then why no Pythagoras? Well, the reason is because it's just a pain in the butt to count diagonals that way. That's really what it comes down to, is like, we're already asking you to track a lot in this game. It's a pain in the butt. By the way, our lead editor, Scott Gray, who is like one of the best humans of all time, was just left a comment when I said we were doing this. And he's like, you and I have to talk someday about why this is so wrong. But did allow us to do it, right? Like, did allow us to do it. But yeah, so you're not alone. A lot of people prefer the Pythagoras, but like, it kind of, if it's the same for both sides of the battle, right, it doesn't matter how you're doing it as long as it's the same. And so we thought, well, let's make this part easier on folks and do it that way.
I was a huge fan of when they did that with D&D, making cubic areas, making blasts, making bursts. It's so easy to adjudicate on a tabletop grid, adjudicate 3 dimensions. Yeah, you could call it slightly less realistic, but it's so worth it, in my opinion. It's so worth it.
The way in which it speeds things up. I had a blast playing some Starfinder 2 at Gen Con, and then all of a sudden we were counting diagonals, and I was like, oh, everything has slowed to a halt now. What happened? We were having such a good time.
Sarah asks, who advocated for adding the fishing downtime project?
So Downtime was a system that I worked on, and I did like sort of the the base rules, and I did crafting and stuff like that, and I was like, okay, so I think this is how it's going to work. And Willie was like, I have some other ideas for how this could work. This was like his second week of working for us, right? So I'm gonna go through and add some projects, and it was like building roads and spending time with loved ones and things that weren't crafting or research. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. And he said, you haven't seen anything yet. Wait till I make fishing. And I thought, like, what are you talking about? This isn't like, how would you make it work in this project? And basically what you see was his first draft in there, because it was so incredible, and he sort of worked it in, and it's like, it's a tweak of it doesn't work exactly the same way as the other Downtime activities does, but it still uses the basic rules for Downtime, and it is a thing that, like, everybody now, whenever you take a respite, there's always almost at least one person who wants to go fishing, right? Because it is so fun. And Willie knew it, like, from the beginning, read the rules and was like, well, fishing is obviously going to be part of this, and made it work. So yeah, it's incredible.
What channels will people be able to get Draw Steel through?
So right now it's available on the MCDM shop. It is available on DriveThruRPG, I think. If it's not, I think it will be eventually. I know the Delian Tomb is up there on DriveThru right now. If you're curious about Draw Steel, one of the best ways to check it out. So the Delian Tomb is about 200 pages of starter adventure. Comes with the pregens. It's about 3 levels of play. It comes with 145 different files, because we give you every flavor of map, gridded, not gridded, no hexes, sorry, but labeled, not labeled, right? We give you encounter sheets to help you run it, right? And that is $10. It's $9.99 to check out. So if you want like a lower cost entry, there's that. There's also, the rules are open right now, so like, people, there's like a Draw Steel compendium online. You could just go read the rules if you want to, and check out. I think like all of the text is open. The only thing that isn't is the art. So that's another way people can go right now. So those are the 2 marketplaces currently where it is available. It may show up some other places.
Yeah. Math Guy says, part that surprised me about the book was all the downtime stuff, like building roads, etc.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we wanted to make. We just wanted to make. It initially started as crafting and research, right? Was a big part of it. And then we were like, well, what else? Maybe you don't want to craft or research anything though. What can those characters do?
Yeah,
and that was all Willie.
Chris Hopper, wasn't he layout for the book?
Yes, Chris did layout and accessibility
right,
for the books. So thank you, Chris. And also, by the way, a designer wrote a bunch of stuff that is in the Heroes book. So thank you, Chris.
Very cool. Glad to have you here, Chris.
Me too. Glad Chris exists.
How do you approach
bacon on a lot of stuff?
How do you approach the challenge of defying MCDM's take on traditional monsters, ancestries, etc.? How do you find the balance between familiar but boring versus unique but alienating? Oh, interesting question. Yeah.
It's a good question. We had a lot of conversations that were like, what is a goblin? What is a goblin for in a game versus what is a goblin for in a narrative? What is and then multiply that by however many monsters there are in the book, right? And how many ancestries.
Character ancestries too, right? Because like a dwarf is not what you'd expect a dwarf to be necessarily, and an elf might not be what you expect an elf to be. There's a lot of nuance that really comes from the world, and so it's all across the game.
Yeah, and there was a desire on our end and a desire on the art team's end to really make things ours, right? But I think there's also then a desire, like, at what point is a goblin not a goblin, right? Like that's a conversation that happens then too. Is like, well, can we still call this a goblin if it's covered in blue fur and 20 feet tall, right? And so a lot of it was just meeting after meeting after meeting, and it was sort of a case by case basis with how comfortable we were pushing the envelope on different things. And some of it was like, well, is the lore for this normally pretty gross? Well, if it's pretty gross, then we're fine throwing a lot of it out and moving in a different direction, right? Is the lore for this something people really love? Well, then maybe we should kind of stick closer to it and that sort of thing, right? And then also our personal opinions were really important in that. Like, but hang on, but I love this about X, Y, and Z. Can we keep it, right? Would be part of it. Yeah.
Very cool. Before we go to next questions, I just want to go to the screen here.
Yeah.
All right. So the Conduit's pretty neat. It has, let's see here. I haven't really gone through the Conduit, but stuff in order. But they got Faith Armor, which gives you temporary stamina, 4 of you, temporary stamina with their Heroic Resource 5. Heroic Resource 3 is their Judgment, which gives, let's talk about potencies, and then we can kind of talk about surges a little bit too. So potencies are numbers basically that you're comparing a result to see if it's affecting creatures. Like this one has agility less than 0 or less than 1 or less than 2 is knocked prone. And so you'd compare that to, say, you're casting it on your party member and you're casting it on your elementalist and their agility is 1, if you got the medium result, they take the holy damage, but they would not be knocked prone.
Correct.
And then some of them also have save ins, and save ins is just a straight 50-50 chance that your turn to lose the condition if it's a save ins condition. So those are potencies, those 0, 1s, and 2s. They're basically based off your highest characteristics. So as you go up in levels, they'll get better. And then you have surges, which is like a generic resource that replaces all sorts of different, like Bless or Bardic Inspiration or things like that. Want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So Surge, as we found a problem like midway through testing where it was like, so we introduced edges, right, and banes because we wanted to make it one thing I love about 5th edition, advantage and disadvantage, reduce the conversations about like, well, I have +1 from this, but -2 from here, right, that kind of thing. And so edges and banes are an instantiation of like, you can only get so much of an advantage to hit, right, and only so much of a disadvantage. But then we reproduced that thing that I don't like in damage bonuses, because it would be like, well, oh, don't forget my +1 damage from here, and don't forget my +3 damage from this, and right, and it was really slowing down combat. And I said, okay, what if? In fact, it wasn't me; it was Jordy, right? Our designer Jordy did a great job with this. He was like, what if you had this resource called surges, right, where it's like instead of a damage bonus, you get a surge. Right. And you keep track of your own surges. And every time you spend a surge, you deal 2 damage. It's damage equal to your highest characteristic score. So it scales with your level. Right. So as you get more powerful, your surges get more powerful. And then I don't have to check with you. Hey, how much damage is that? Blah, blah, blah. No, I just know I have a surge. I mark it on my sheet. And then when I want to spend it, I can just add that damage in and it's good. Right. And that really changed things. And then it was like, well, could we also use surges then to increase a potency, right? So, hey, I got that agility less than 1, and I really want to be able to knock that person prone, and they have 1 agility. Well, if I spend 2 surges, I can boost up a potency by 1, and now you do fall prone, right? So, so you can spend surges those 2 ways, right? Increase potency or increase damage.
Yeah. Explained that way, it really makes sense and takes away a lot of the exactly what you're saying. Hey, don't forget your bless, don't forget this bonus, don't forget that bonus. And there's a lot less crosstalk that way. People are already having to pay attention to what their character's doing, so they don't need to pay attention to what your character's doing at the same time. You can just run your own show. You have the resources, they're stacked up from all the things they gave you, and you spend them when you want. And then you have another kind of a group resource, hero tokens, that the whole group has. It starts out with 1 per character. And then you can get more if you have like a success with a reward, or if you do something cool, or any other reason the GM might want to award more. So those you can spend to get more surges, to succeed on a save you fail, to reroll a test and use a new result, and to regain stamina without spending recoveries. So that's a really valuable use of them.
Yeah, that's often how we see them used. And it's good because Draw Steel, especially at first level, sometimes can sneak up on people, the idea of not missing, right? So when you're a new player, you'll be like, oh, no, wait, right? Like I thought I was fine. And so it's like, okay, well, the hero tokens can help you not die as you're learning the game, which is
because the not missing goes both ways. The monsters don't miss you either. So, yeah.
That's right.
Another game, Daggerheart's that way, where it seems to sneak up on you. Like it gets real deadly real fast. Yeah. I think this is a little bit more forgiving than that. But yeah, definitely a thing to watch out for.
Yeah. When I played a Conduit, I really enjoyed this ability where you could target a 2x2 area and teleport the things in the area, the creatures in the area, to different spots. And that was so fun for me because I could think up all these ways to use it in what felt like, to me, clever little tricks to make things happen. And it was just so fun to find ways to exploit what was really a pretty simple ability.
Yeah, that's the Lightfall ability that the Conduit has. Yeah. You can teleport yourself and each ally in unoccupied. So now it is a burst that emanates from you, right? It was a little too powerful.
We saw it used in some pretty ingenious ways when we were doing it. Yeah.
It was hella good.
Yeah, it emanates from you, so it's technically a bigger burst, right? Because it's 2 squares from you instead of a 2x2, and you can teleport yourself and each ally in the area to unoccupied spaces, and so you can move around everybody in the area if you want to after you burst with holy light. Yeah,
so fun.
Yeah, this game, as a player, there's so much going on that is fun for planning.
That's good to hear.
It's going to be fun. I think the DM needs to be careful that the players don't get too involved in the minutia of everyone else's turn and really focus on their turn, because they need to think of a lot of stuff to be ready to take their turn. So you don't want them sidetracked.
Correct.
They need to be planning ahead.
Yeah, and what's good is people tend to, by the like the second or third battle, they start to learn like, oh, hang on. Now I know what David's character can do, and I understand how I can set up David to do something really cool, right? We've been playing through the Delian Tomb, or we did like months ago, and we filmed it, right? And I was directing, but you can see everybody start to say like, oh, they're going to do that thing. You're trying to do that thing that you want to do, and I can help you do that thing, right? Like I can get you into a better position, or and that brought such joy to my heart when I saw people realizing how they could do that, right? So,
Nice. Here we go from Daily Pasta. What was your favorite class to design or watch the process of the team design? Thanks for all the work you guys put in. I look forward to writing it.
So far, I mean, I have really enjoyed watching the Summoner be designed. We talked about that at the beginning, right? Just because of the unique challenge that presented and how the team sort of took to it with gusto. Matt, in our first design meeting, said, I would like the Summoner to be able to control 12 creatures. And my jaw dropped, and I was like, it'll never work, right? And Willie was like, no problem. I'll figure it out. Right. Like, and did. And so that's been a joy. But in terms of the classes that are currently available to people to play, I really, really loved watching the Null, because the Null went from 0 to hero. It really did. And Jordy put a ton of work in to make that work. And at one point I suggested cutting the Null, because I was like, I don't know if we have the time, if we can get this to work in the time period we can. And Jordy was like, I'm going to make it work. And sure did. So yeah, that was always fun to eat crow when it results in more content for the game you're making, right? Like, so that was great.
Yeah, I like the Nulls. They got their knockback that they can slide people all around with. They got their Null field that they can lock people down with. They got their Inertia Shield triggered action where they can take half damage and knockback as a free triggered action when they do it. And then they got their Inertial Step, which lets them shift 3 before or after they're hit. The Faster is like a Flurry of Blows where they are doing attacks on 2 different creatures and a third creature potentially, so just rip up minions. And then they got their Stunning, which is, gotta have Stunning. And and I think my game just stopped working. So I love.
We broke it. We broke roll 20.
We have to look at the actual Null sheet here for their stun.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so we don't have a stun condition because we basically eliminated conditions that mean you don't get to take any kind of turn. And so what this means is dazed, which reduces your actions to one
action, right? Yeah.
And you're slowed, right? So
and
we were like,
is really bad. It's only a speed of 2, not half speed.
Speed of 2. Yeah, exactly. So that's it's fun. It's fun to when that pops off and you get somebody with it.
So a lot of cool stuff in the Null. I'm looking forward to that. Someone's going to play that Saturday, so I want to see how that plays for sure.
Excellent. That's awesome. I'm so excited for y'all to play. I can't wait to check it out.
Yeah, it's going to be neat. And the adventure's fun, and I can see how you could make a class work with a lot of creatures on the table, because the way you guys have minions working, and you've been doing minions like this for a long time now with the previous books that you guys worked on.
Flea Mortals,
It's a lot of fun, I think, for players. The way they can just bash around minions and knock them into each other and sweep out a whole bunch of them at a time. Should be a fun adventure to play, for sure.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear it. I'm really glad to hear it.
I could imagine brand new players would just have a blast with it. You know, the amount of havoc they could wreak on the battlefield. They would love it.
That's the plan. That's the plan for everybody to have a good time. So good. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah. David, you got any more questions?
Well, I'm curious, James, have you thought about a strategy for keeping the enthusiasm high about the game over coming months and years?
Yeah. So that's the question, right? Like from the get-go, we didn't want to make a game that just was like, hey, my Kickstarter arrived, I put it on the shelf, and now I don't play it ever, right? That is certainly it's great to sell copies of a game, but our goal always is to make a game that people want to play, right? That they're eager and excited to play. And so one thing that we're doing, right, is that I didn't even bring up this other product we're making, which is a book of encounters, right? That is going to be drop-in montage tests and negotiations, delves, right? Sort of like dungeon delve style 3-room dungeon encounters, right? And stuff like that that you can drop right into your game. And we want to put out content for directors, right? Because we know that they are the people who get people to play the game. And so the easier we can make it for a director to run Draw Steel, and the more fun we can make it for a director to run Draw Steel, then that becomes a thing that they want to do. They want to call their friends and say, I would like to run Draw Steel. Let's, come over, meet me on Roll20, meet me on Foundry, whatever, right? Like, let's play, right? On that note, we are also in the middle of creating a VTT. So the people who make DM Hub, which is a great virtual tabletop for 5e, if they are currently play testing the Codex, which is our VTT that they have built from the ground up in partnership with us. We have somebody who's basically their full-time job, right? Jordy has sort of transitioned to helping get all of that information on to the VTT. And so so the idea is that that's going to have like a ton of automation, right? And do a ton of stuff for you. All of the stuff that Tom, I assume, spent many hours doing in Roll20, which is beautiful work, by the way. It looks really, really amazing what you've done. We're trying to make that automatic, right? When you go to use the Codex, right?
And you can watch a lot of the early games right now on YouTube. They have a lot of the early games up, so you can see kind of how the development's going on it. And it's very feature complete, it looks like.
Yeah, there's a lot, we're like stomping out bugs and stuff like that, but they're doing all, forced movement automatically. If you knock somebody off a ledge, they automatically take damage because they do height and stuff like that in the table, right? They've worked really hard to make something really incredible. And so I hope that makes it easy for people who play at a distance to be able to fire up Draw Steel and play. In fact, you can sign up to playtest now with the Codex, and I think after you play, they give you a code to get it on Steam, right, where you can get it. Hopefully Steam, because of the way discovery works on Steam, people find the game right through the Codex. But a big part of the strategy, right, was opening the rules, right? So like, I think the three of us know that if you have an open system, it means that you don't have to be the ones who create every adventure for it. And you don't have to be the ones who create every character option. And there's a lot of people who are as good or better designers than me, right? And they will be able to take and do extraordinary things with Draw Steel. And I'm really, really excited for that to happen. And so that's a big part of the strategy too, is like, let people come in and make stuff with this game, let people profit from it, let people talk about it, and if they want to write a novel about the setting, I think they can, right? Like they can make software, right? There's already Forge Steel is a character creator that people can like use and just has Draw Steel's information in it. Stawl, STAWL, is an app that helps you like preparing counters and build monsters and stuff like that, right? So like, and that's all of that is amazing. It makes it easier to play the game, and we want that, right? So like that license being open is a huge part of the strategy, in addition to then making all of these products that we want to make that we think are going to be cool and help people stay in the game. So right now, those are the biggest parts of the strategy. The probably the fourth part of that strategy is like, we continue to like our biggest marketing arm right now is the fact that there's a guy named Matt Colville who makes videos, and people watch them, right? And so like having Matt continue to make videos and talk about Draw Steel and put out an actual play and you know, and stream about it and stuff like that, like hopefully that keeps interest up as well. So yeah, we'll see. Should be a lot of fun.
James, thanks so much for coming on. You're
thank you.
Really a credit to the game and to TTRPGs in general, I think. Yeah. So
well, so are both of you. You're both lovely humans, and thank you for this channel talks about D&D, it talks about Shadow Dark, it talks about Steel, it talks about Daggerheart. You talk about so many games. You introduce people to lots of games. I love what you're doing over here at D20play. Thank you so much for shining a spotlight and like taking the time. I think, Tom, your players are so lucky to have you. Like, look at all the work you put into just this one-shot game they're playing on Saturday. Incredible. So thank you both for having me here.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone who's watching, and go out and try